summer backwards, buoyed on a sound wave, on a clear morning, a golden silver day, winding through the straits, longing for the shore, drowning in words, searching for the lost score. Gliding the shallows, maze of coral, underwater frescoes, worlds we swallow, taken from a dream, Venus and Mars, Sphinx beneath the sea, smile behind the mask.
Welcome to the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. I'm Dan Miles. That was The Summer Backwards, which can be found on an album called A Life Within a Day, which was a collaboration between former Genesis guitarist Steve Hackett and Yes bassist Chris Squire. It was released in 2012 under the band name Squacket, a deliberately awkward combination of their last names. As I'm sure you know, we lost Chris Squire to leukemia back on June 27th. Since he was such a major figure in so many of our personal musical worlds, I knew I needed to honor him in some small way. So I reached out to Tom Bowers, who was the host of the Super Enthusiast Radio podcast, who is a progressive rock fan, who is a Yes fan, and who is a bass player, all of which made him the ideal candidate for it. The Pink Floyd panel discussion I had participated in on his show was very well received, and I thought that format was the best way to go for this. So we agreed to do a joint venture whereby we would both be airing this as an episode of our respective shows. Then we rounded up a few more usual suspects and recorded the discussion you're about to hear while the sad news was still fresh in our hearts and minds. Now I'll pass it over to Tom, and we'll be underway.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Super Enthusiast Radio. My name is Tom Bowers, and I am your host. This week, we have one of our special music roundtable episodes. These are always a lot of fun to do, although the reason for this one was a bit sad, because we're going to be talking about Chris Squire, the legendary bass player from Yes, who just passed away recently. Definitely a musical hero to me and to so many other folks as well. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to get together for a tribute / therapy session talking about Chris and his music and how much it's meant to us. So that is what is on the agenda. In addition to the returning friends and regular voices from the Super Enthusiast Rogues Gallery, this week we also got an opportunity to talk briefly with CJ Vanston. He's a musician, writer, producer who's worked with everybody under the sun. And in fact, he just finished up the latest Toto album. Toto's going to be on tour with Yes this summer, and CJ is a major Yes fanatic, so we're glad we had a chance to get his thoughts on all of this as well. We caught up with him a little bit after the group discussion, but we've inserted his interview into the middle of the episode, so it's sort of like the awesome halftime show. You'll know it is time to go to CJ when you hear the Rickenbacker growl like this. If you are new to Super Enthusiast Radio, welcome aboard. We talk about pop culture every week, the people who make it, the people who love it, and everything in between. You can always find us here at superenthusiastradio.com. And without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Greetings and salutations. You are listening to Super Enthusiast Radio.
Where the DJ talks, don't say anything.
Okay.
Yes.
We can, Matt does not have a camera, so he is at a slight disadvantage.
I'm a host.
Matt, send your image using the force.
Here it comes.
Throw an avatar up there and see what happens.
Oh, God. I'll come up with something.
Don't say Avatar around Roger Dean.
Oh, God, yeah. Wouldn't want to cause any trouble.
Okay, so yes, there's been some stealth settling in, and it goes, hello everyone, welcome to a special edition of Super Enthusiast Radio, one of our panel shows that we do occasionally, where we become a multi-headed talk beast, a conversational hydra, if you will. And well, it always seems like whenever we put together a large panel like this, we end up talking about music, and we definitely have a panel of both musicians and music fans here tonight to discuss Chris Squire, who sadly passed away on the 27th of June, and I think it's safe to say affected all of our lives. We have Dan Miles returning to the show, host of the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. Good evening, sir.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that.
Yes. Also returning to the show, our good friend Peter Zakos, composer, producer, musician, and fashionable man about town.
Hey,
Yay.
hey everybody.
And making his debut tonight on our fair program, Mr. Matt Brown, keyboardist extraordinaire, member of prog band Heliopolis, as well as Empty Caverns with Joel Martin.
Thank you, you're too kind.
And a host of the Playground of Sound show on the Deep Nuggets radio network. And hi, Matt, how's it going?
Hi, it's going great.
Yay, Matt.
Oh, shucks.
How are we all doing tonight?
Do we get to haze, Matt?
Well,
I think so.
He's already invisible. I say that's punishment enough. So,
my comments may or may not be heard as a result of being invisible. That's another thing.
And we have a special mystery guest who may or may not be joining us later on. We'll see how the evening progresses.
Just a mystery guest.
Yes, but let's begin at the beginning. I want to go around the room and see what everyone's first experience was with Yes Music and with Chris Squire specifically. What was the song that grabbed you? What was the thing that turned you on? Daniel?
Well, I'll be happy to answer your question, but before we do that, I just wanted to make a comment. You know, I recently did my 5-year anniversary special, which you, Tom, contributed to, by the way, with your specially recorded audio shout out. So thanks again for that.
You're welcome.
So I asked the listeners to say what their favorite episodes were, and a whole lot of them chose that Pink Floyd discussion we did as a panel, similar to this one. So when I heard that, I thought, wait a minute, what's the message here? Are they saying they want less of me on the show? They want to see me relegated to a miscellaneous panelist instead of the host. So I might as well just cut to the chase and rename the show the Friends of Tom Music Podcast, for crying out loud.
Oh,
I see. All right. Well,
moving on up in the world.
my people will be in touch. We'll figure that out.
Tom, if I decided to broadcast on my show, I would have to change it to the Playground of Tom, you see.
And I have also appeared on your fine program.
Yes, you have.
Matt, in the past.
Very, very enjoyable.
That was really cool. We need to do that again sometime. So yeah, last time we had one of these panel discussions about music. We were talking about The Endless River, the apparently final Pink Floyd album that was released last year, and Dan ended up taking that and broadcasting it on his show, and with some wraparound and some additions to it, and it went over well. So we decided this time it's just going to be a crossover right out of the gate. So this is the Friends of Super Dan Enthusiast cast, or something like that. As we,
Honestly, the impetus for this show was when I heard Chris Squire had passed away. That was just too big of a thing to ignore as a music podcaster. He's too big of a icon and too important of a person for me to just let that slide by. When Ronnie Montrose died, I felt the same way. Within a couple of days of his death, I had put a tribute together, and I thought one was equally warranted. If I would have tried to do it as an episode of my show, I would have had people call in one by one. And I remember the Pink Floyd situation where we all talked at the same time. And so having that experience, I thought, well, let's get Tom involved. Obviously, as a bass player and a progressive rock enthusiast, Tom is a perfect fit as well. So I'm glad we're doing this. And, Tom did ask me a question, which I have yet to answer, regarding my first awareness of Yes. So let me roll into that. My first awareness of Yes was when I was living in New York City. This was around 1977. I started seeing the Yes logo on T-shirts that my peers were wearing. So first I just saw their name. The first time I heard them was on FM radio at a friend's house back in the days when home stereos were kicking. People were proud of their home stereos. It wasn't about computer speakers. So my point is, when I first heard them, I really heard them cranking. The song was Roundabout, which is a type of Yes tune that would get played on FM radio, maybe not so much Perpetual Change and things like that. I was impressed with the bass part, but frankly, I was equally impressed with all the instruments and the harmony vocals too. I mean, not only had I never heard a band that sounded like that, I'd never heard a song that was structured like that, with so many different musical passages and interludes. I got the impression that a shortage of musical ideas was not a problem for these guys. Then after that, I moved to California, and that's when I really started to delve into their catalog. And I think my first favorite was probably Yes songs. It wasn't as sonically pristine as the studio recordings, and the playing was probably a little sloppier at times. I just dug the vibe of it. Because for me, really, Yes is more than just a sound I listen to. It's more kind of like a place that I go. They have this world, this universe that's completely unique to them. Roger Dean contributed a lot to the visualization of that world. He was a good fit for them. And for some reason, Chris Squire has always been my favorite band member. I just always thought that guy just had the greatest job in the world. I mean, when I looked at the artwork and the photographs on Yes songs, and I saw him in his, black and white suit playing his bass, I thought, the drummer, he has to work a lot. And the singer, he has to work a lot. But being the bass player in Yes just seemed like the dream gig. I actually wanted to be Chris Squire, So yeah, and of course he was a virtuoso on his instrument, but really they all were, So it wasn't so much of that, but he was my favorite, and I'll pass it to whoever wants to go next.
Well, let's take it over to Peter.
Well, hey guys, and sorry that we have to meet under these circumstances.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping that we'd all get together and talk again because of another Pink Floyd record, but instead we're here to discuss Chris Squire because he choked. So I first want to say, as just a little tribute, I want to say thank you, Chris, for so much amazing music and so many amazing memories, and for being a part of probably the greatest band ever. And much love and respect and feelings to his family and to everyone who knew him. And I would probably selfishly take up this entire discussion for the next however many hours, telling the whole history of me with Yes music. And I can't, maybe we'll get some later. So I'll just stick with just my intro and hope we can tell our stories later. Just the intro was, even though I was born in the 70s, I was a self-aware child in the 80s. And so the 80s were really my grow-up decade. So my exposure to Yes, because I was an MTV generation kid, was Owner of a Lonely Heart. And that was my first understanding of what Yes was. It was Yes West, as I would come to understand later. And I heard it as a kid and immediately loved it. I mean, as a kid, I had enough exposure to a lot of different styles of music, but let's face it, pre-internet, I was in the South, the radio there was just kind of like rock and pop and top 40, Casey Kasem. And, MTV was just kind of popular music, so Yes, 90125 it was. I heard this music, that, and Leave It, and It Can Happen, and it felt immediate love. It sounded intellectual. It sounded like these guys were above everyone else. They were kind of in this elite, like they were the Illuminati making pop music. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. And the harmonies were great. And they sang with this accent where they intonated every word very carefully, and all the writing was good. And I would every chance I could get to see a video on MTV, I would take it. And I remember the first time I ever bought a Yes album, it was through, you guys will love this. Remember the Columbia House, like get 10 albums for a penny?
Yes.
Sure do.
And then you have to buy 3 more at like $21.95. I got 10 cassettes, and one of them was 90125, and I took that to camp. I went to Interlochen Music Camp in Michigan, and I played it to death, this tape, so much, and didn't know anything else. Didn't know that a Yes pre-90125 existed at all, period, until high school, and I'll tell that story later. So that was my intro to Yes.
Matt, let's hear your story.
My story is actually not too dissimilar from Peter's. I was born in the 70s also, and I started listening to FM radio in about 81, 82. I probably heard roundabout during those years, but where my musical head was at, it sounded very alien, I think. And I would later revisit it and be bowled over by it. But my initial impressions were, whoa, this is strange. What is this? And then when 90125 came out, I'd been hired because I was this funny, precocious young kid. I'd been hired at a local mom and pop record store, and I idolized everybody who worked in the shop. And one of them in particular, when 90125 came out, of course, I had a similar experience that Peter did. I saw the video for Owner of a Lonely Heart, and I went, wow, this is really interesting. I haven't heard anything like this before. And I was really into metal at that point, so this was kind of a departure. But one of the guys at the record store, basically, they were playing the album in the store one day. It was December of 83, and he said, you should check this album out. I think you would really enjoy it. And so just based on that recommendation and hearing the single, I bought the album. And for the first 6 months, I only listened to side one. In fact, I loved everything on side one. I think even though Owner was the first song that I really heard and went, wow, the first song that really kicked me in the butt was Changes. Something about it just got under my skin, the way that the intro was with all that interlocking percussion and the bass and everything. And then when the whole band kicked in, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing just took me to a whole other place. And of course, I love the vocal harmonies. And later on, I would get heavy into the rest of the catalog, and we'll probably get to that at some point. But that was my initial jumping in point too.
Nice.
It's so wild to me that both Peter and Matt recognized Trevor Rabin as their first Yes guitarist when so many of us, we had albums and albums of Steve Howe in our brains first. So that's cool. That's interesting. It's interesting to hear that.
For me, Steve Howe was the guy in Asia. I didn't know about any history. Yeah, isn't that crazy? And later I find, oh, he was in Yes too? Oh, okay. This is interesting. So yeah, it's a completely different perspective based on your age group,
I get the sense that we all fall into kind of a similar demographic, the three of us, Matt, Peter, and myself, in that we were sort of born at the same time and became aware of pop music around the same time. Because, my story is very much the same. The Owner of a Lonely Heart video was my first ever inkling that the band existed. I was aware of it, but I wasn't a fan. It was just sort of what was on the radio. Right around the time that the Union thing happened, there was the MTV rockumentary, which was the sort of everyone coming together and telling their story and realizing that,
I remember that.
there's this huge storied history of this band that goes back and back and back. And I loved that, being someone who's so much 70s music speaks to me, growing up in the 80s and being able to become a fan of something and then do the research and find out that there's this huge back catalog and all of this great stuff to discover. It happened with Yes, it happened with Floyd, it happened with Queen, it happened with all of these bands that I'm a fan of. And it was when the Union thing happened, because it seemed to be this watershed moment for the band at that point. And, no one, I don't think at the time, was claiming that, yes, this is the final version of the band. But it did seem to be a sort of apotheosis in pop culture, if not necessarily in music, because the Union album has all kinds of interesting interesting awkwardness and challenges behind it.
There was also that fascinating documentary, the Yes Years documentary, that was pretty in-depth. And then it ended with the Union rehearsals and pretty much ended on this note of the Union tour, which a lot of the members of the band said they loved the shows, the tour, even though they hated the album. And so it did. I agree with you. It did feel like some sort of coming to a close of some sort. Who knew
there was
what was going to come after him?
Yeah, 25 more years of going on and going on and going on.
Do you guys remember Rick Wakeman's quote about Union? He said it should have called the album Onion because it made him want to cry.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Something that Dan said earlier too. You talked about seeing the logo on T-shirts and stuff. Actually, a few years before I ever heard a lick of their music, someone had given me a whole box of Billboard magazines that were all from around 1980, and they had full-page ads of Yes shows and drama. And so I saw the artwork and went, wow, this is really unusual. So I was familiar with the artwork way before. I was more familiar with Roger Dean long before I heard a note of Yes music. It was kind of funny in that respect.
I want to thank all three of you for making me feel so damn old.
Aw, shucks.
Well, listen, what we're going to talk about, the shows we've seen, how many times we've seen Yes. But
we've been to a lot of
Dan's
the
going to
same
have one
shows.
leg up on us on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when you're ready to roll into that, Tom, let me know.
Oh, this was your idea, pal. Just don't forget that. I just wanted to say thank you to Peter for mentioning the Yes Years documentary, which I had a terrible menial job at the post office the year that Yes Years box set came out, which between Union and Yes Years was the time when I figured like, okay, now I'm ready. Now I'm going to delve. So I bought the box set. It had the video cassette that came with it, with the Yes Years documentary and all that stuff. I ripped the audio from the Yes Years documentary and would listen to that over and over and over again at the at my terrible menial post office job. Just getting to hear. And it was the first time I'd heard, like, there are snippets of songs in there that I had never heard on the record, but I'd like. All of these records I hadn't heard yet, I got little previews from that documentary, and then I would be intrigued and go, what album did that come from? But just listening...
Tom,
yeah?
I had that experience with Genesis, actually, because right before I started buying their whole back catalog, there had been an MTV documentary that used tons of their early music as bumper behind the narration and behind the interviews. Yeah. And so I'd hear these snippets of things, and then as I bought each album, I was like, oh, wait, I recognize that bit. It was very strange, but very cool at the same time.
I had that experience with King Crimson, actually, from the Yes Years documentary, because in the section where Bruford talks about leaving after Close to the Edge, they have some footage of them recording Easy Money.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know the song. I didn't even know the band. And I was like, that song sounds cool. What is that? It took me a little while before I could talk to someone who actually knew what the song was, and he guided me to it.
Yeah, just being able to hear those snippets of music and the band talking about their history, and I fell in love with everyone's accents and just listen to that over and over and over again. The Yes Years, if I had to pick like one Yes thing to listen to forever, that might actually be it, rather than any of the records.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think that's
really
great.
Cool.
Has everyone else seen all the other documentaries, Yes Speak and the Rockman and all the other ones, the one that's on YouTube that I think was BBC produced? Have you all seen all those?
No, I'd like to.
I've seen most, if not all, and all the ones I've seen have been good. The only ones that aren't going to be good are going to be things that, our third parties cobbled together from, existing, for which those are like, on Netflix with nothing but bad reviews. But the ones that the bands have done themselves have all been really great.
Tom will like this, but do any of you get a kick out of how different Chris Squire sounds in each one of those documentaries? Because sometimes he's got that, hey, how you doing? He's got that kind of thing. And on a Yes Years, I don't know if he was heavy into cigarettes at the time, but he's just, it's just a horrible jam. And he sounds like a sick Roger Waters. And then other times he sounds really uppity, and it's just funny, the different dynamics. I don't know if you guys ever noticed.
Yeah, it might have been, they might have just caught him on a bad day, he had a cold or something.
It might have been, but I always liked listening to him talk.
That's great. Well, that's another thing that, and this can launch us into a general musical thing. In addition to, with Chris, in addition to his bass playing, his voice is so incredibly distinctive, and to be in another band with another vocalist whose voice is so incredibly distinctive, they really, he and John Anderson, their voices are sort of the two sides of the same coin, They complement each other so well, but there's no one who sounds like either one of them in pop music.
No. Yeah, they're very unique.
In John Anderson's tribute that he put out recently, probably a day or two ago. He said that Chris Squire had always said that he saw himself as Darth Vader to John Anderson's Obi-Wan.
Right.
And that John Anderson said that he saw Chris as Christopher Robin to John Anderson's Winnie the Pooh. So it shows you the kind of guys they were, the differences there.
Either way, in the height differential, it makes sense. So
Perfect. Yes.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, John Anderson, I actually was listening to an interview with him the other day where he said that he, when he was starting to sing and he was developing his voice, he didn't sing falsetto. He had a natural alto tenor. So John Anderson doesn't sing falsetto, and what that means is he sings from the chest, and his placement of his voice is in the chest. Very unique for someone who sings so highly. Chris Squire, on the other hand, has that kind of quality, that tonal quality to his voice because he's placing the tone of his voice behind his nose. Sounds a little bit nasally, but it's the way that he can hit those pitches just right. Because he's often singing a third above John, which is insane.
Yeah,
especially for someone twice his size. And those two mixes of a head voice and a chest voice work really well together, and that's part of the Yes magic that you're hearing in the harmonies.
I think, too, the harmonies being such a big deal, I know for myself that even though I was learning to play a couple of different instruments by the time I discovered their music, it was the vocals that initially, I think, drew me to the sound in the first place, and particularly the way the voices blended together. And actually, a few years later, when Big Generator came out, a friend of mine in high school who was a bass player and a big fan of the band and of Chris, obviously, he had a Rickenbacker and everything. He and I and another friend had a vocal trio. They invited me to be a part of this vocal trio, and the idea was for us to sing Crosby, Stills, and Nash type stuff, but they wanted to do some Yes music. And that was really cool because it really made you listen, especially as a 16-year-old, learning how to sing some of these songs and figuring out where our voices were going to be placed based on our ranges. You really focused on the vocals, you know. We did the obvious stuff like I've Seen All Good People, and then we did like a 3-part arrangement of Onward, I think, and a few other things along those lines. But that was another part of what kind of drew me into that whole world. A big part of it, of the initial attraction, was the singing, was the vocal blend. And then it was like, oh, wow, the instruments are doing all this crazy stuff too. Wow, you know. So
in 1968, when John Anderson and Chris Squire formed that band, which is 100 years before you guys were born, they specifically said they wanted this to be a vocal-oriented band. They wanted the focus to be on the vocals. Obviously, the instrumentation took off too, but that was always the plan from the beginning, and that's why that area gets so much attention.
And you definitely hear it in the first record.
Oh yeah, I love that first record.
It's there already. One of my favorite Yes tracks ever is their cover of Something's Coming from West Side Story.
Oh, yeah.
And that's very early Anderson. You can tell he's still kind of just discovering who he is as a vocalist. And it's not quite as polished, and it's not quite in the range he would later use, but Squire is like there. And his whole background was church choirs and that sort of thing, which is so it makes sense that he was responsible for a lot of that big harmony sound.
There's a few comments I wanted to make about his bass playing specifically. Really, 3 things come to mind. First, he was definitely a pick player. He played with a pick. It was very obvious. Some of the things he did really could only be done with a pick. It was integral to his sound and his technique. And second, he was like a lead guitarist on bass.
Right.
Not in the sense of not being tasteful. It was like he was not afraid to play things that sounded like that. It seemed to work well within the context of that particular band, where it might not. For example, you think of John Paul Jones and Led Zeppelin. He kind of cut loose on Lemon Song, but for the most part, if he just took off on some kind of thing like Chris Squire plays, it wouldn't fit in Led Zeppelin. But in Yes, it worked. So the pick player, lead guitar and bass, and the other thing is that Rickenbacker, that trebly, grindy sound.
Oh, yeah.
Just seems so well suited for his style of music. It was like the perfect marriage of an instrument and a player, I felt. And I'll refer to Tom on this because he is a bass player.
Well, I assume we've all heard the roundabout isolated bass track that made the rounds a little while ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can get it on Jammer. Jam-It. It's a iPhone app that allows you to buy isolated tracks and then play along with them. I think it's called Jam-It. That's where where the elements came from. They got put up on YouTube.
It came from the Rock Band game, is what I started credited to.
Oh, okay, yeah, and Rock Band got the elements too.
Well, that makes sense.
They have it. They have it for a lot of Rush tunes as well. Just throwing that out there.
They got Yes made Rock Band. That's great. I didn't think that was ever.
Yeah.
That's fantastic because it's along the lines of like the Dragon Force thing or whatever. It's like let's make really challenging music for our game. It makes a lot more sense than some of the other artists they've chosen.
And I have a mixture of admiration for Chris Squire for doing all the off rhythm stuff, and a curiosity as to why he'd want to put himself through that. To have to like sing and then drop the note and sing and then drop the note and then play something crazy and go for the odd time signature. I don't know if it felt natural for him to play those strange things, or if he just wanted to challenge himself, or if he just wanted his instrument to stand out at times. But it definitely made him a unique presence. In addition to volume and stuff, the choices he made as a bass player were very unique and unusual.
Right.
Even what's been written about and what's been culled together from interviews with them about how they wrote and the process of how they labored over each note, each beat, what would be next, especially in that era of their music, of their recording history. It's not only his genius and his musical phrasing that made him unique and why he was choosing things like that. It probably benefited him in another way, too, if you consider he's going to have to play that song for 30 more years, so, give or take. And how wonderful to have something that you have to actually kind of think a little bit and be on your toes rather than just be bored playing, something over and over. I mean, I've heard all members of that band talk about what the experience of playing Roundabout is like, 30 years down the line, because that song is the most overplayed song.
Yeah.
And it's cool and it's fun, and certainly Squire's bass line in that is no slouch in any capacity.
It's not the sort of thing you can sleepwalk through, a lot of those compositions. Yeah. The one thing that's always struck me about Squire's playing is there's a great combination of sort of polish and garage that you don't normally get with someone with his kind of chops. And I don't know if that comes from the fact that it's interesting that although he does have a musical education and he's spent a lot of time in church choirs, and that's where his sort of sense of harmony and composition comes from. He's basically a self-taught bass player.
Yes. And
I think maybe that informs his style a little bit, that he was out there just sort of blazing a trail. I mean, he's listening to Jack Bruce and he's listening to, Paul McCartney and folks who come before him in the form, but there isn't a sense of formality about his playing.
That's a great point about him being self-taught, and also the whole concept of progressive rock is to be different and make progress and stretch anyway. So the combination of those two things. In other words, they would want him to probably play something unusual because although did they ever identify themselves as a progressive rock band? Did anybody who we call progressive rock call themselves progressive rock?
Is progressive rock a retroactive label only? I don't know when it became a term of use.
Usually musical terms, like niche terms like that, are media created. Because it's just easier for the media and for the trades to speak about a band and place them in a certain, to pigeonhole them in a way, just so that their readers can get a good sense of who they're talking about.
I had heard that apparently in the late 60s, the word progressive was used much in the same way that underground was used, both in the States and in London. It could refer to Jimi Hendrix as well as it could to King Crimson. I mean, it was a very, very broad, pretty general. It wasn't specific to Mellotrons and Tolkien and stuff. You know what I mean? It went in a lot of different directions. I had a funny thing happen to me when I went to school, when I went to college in the 90s. I went to Florida and I met a girl and we were talking about music and she said, "What kind of music do you like?" And I like progressive music. She goes, "Oh, you mean stuff like REM?" And I'm thinking, oh, wow, that's right. For a lot of people of a different generation, progressive means alternative. So it's...
The big difference is these bands are not trying to have 3-minute radio hits. They're putting out long pieces. They weren't going for hits. Even Roundabout is very long for a hit single. Whereas REM, they were trying to. So
at the time, all this music was brand new, and record companies were looking for new bands in the wake of the success of the album, like Sgt. Pepper, for example. It sort of started a new trend. And a lot of the record companies were saying, "Oh, we don't understand this music, but it's making money. Let them do what they want." And I've even heard the members of Yes say that about the recording of records like Fragile and Close to the Edge, where, the record companies would stay out of the way. They saw that Fragile made it to the top 5 and said, "Oh, let's just let these guys do it. They're making money. And at the time, FM radio, especially rock radio, was very loosely formatted. You would hear a lot of different music in the course of an hour, and not just hard rock or not just brand new stuff. I mean, it was a big mix. And the impression that I got, and I became an avid fan of collecting radio tapes, especially from the late 60s and early 70s, to actually hear the way they used to mix music up is pretty crazy. It's really fascinating. And you'd hear like Miles Davis alongside Donovan and stuff. And that was the way it was at the time.
FM DJs liked long songs because it gave them a chance to get up and use the bathroom.
Or do other things, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Oh, man, come on, Tales from Topographic Oceans. You got 20 minutes. You can drive home and come back.
I can't imagine now hearing Roundabout in anything except its full format, even on the radio, just because that song, to me, including the middle section and then the bridge and everything, and the whole end, to be just one cohesive piece. But
have you guys ever heard the single edit of Roundabout before?
yes. Well, what I was about to say is I met, a few years ago, Jerry Greenberg, who was president of Atlantic Records, which became Atco. When Yes was coming and becoming known in the U.S., Jerry was instrumental in breaking them because he convinced them to do a radio-ready edit of Roundabout, which they didn't want to do, but they were open to it. And Jerry said, look, the music is good. This song is great. People are going to love it. I'll convince the radio stations to play it. We just got to get it down. Mm-hmm. And what I like about that story is that I feel like I wasn't alive then, but I feel like radio back then and pop music as it were back then worked in the way that it should, in the sense that you could have a song that was cut to hit that market and to play like Roundabout, but it would act as a gateway. People would hear it, they get into the band, then whatever the band had, if it was good music, didn't matter what it was, people would love it. And it was a huge success.
Interesting sort of, well, I was going to say it was incongruous, but I don't know if it really was, that a band that odd and sort of very much kind of in their own bubble, in their own world, and didn't quite fit into a format, managed to achieve such like incredibly massive commercial success. I mean, they are the sort of the poster band for their genre, if you will.
And that's the thing. It's they get knocked a lot by various hipsters or hipster trades or what have you in music. Rolling Stone has never been too kind to Yes, let's face it. And they've been knocked as sort of these grandfathers of prog, and they were always sort of inaccessible and everything, which is really silly because there are other prog bands that are way less accessible than Yes. And yet Yes did what very, very few prog bands could do, which is achieve just an enormous success worldwide and reinvent themselves and achieve, equal worldwide success. This is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, Winnie the Pooh on lead vocals. They're very non-threatening.
Shuffling.
Indeed.
Yeah, they deserved and earned every bit of their success.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that the critical establishment has come around a little bit. If Rolling Stone can fall in love with Rush to the extent that they have, then anything is possible. So
I never thought that would ever happen.
Yeah.
Right.
There's something I wanted to get your guys' thing on. We should bring it back to Chris. His nickname, the Fish. Let me run down the Fish references that I'm aware of, and if you guys can add anything to it, great. Of course, his zodiac sign was Pisces, the Fish. He played bass, which can be misread as bass. He had a reputation for taking long baths. He once accidentally flooded a hotel room, and according to Jeff Downs, I just read this an hour ago, he once fell asleep in a hotel bathtub, and the fire department had to break the door down so somebody could get in there, wake him up, and bring him to the show, which started an hour late. So am I missing any?
No, the bathtub one is the one I'm most familiar with, mostly from Tim Morse's book, his collection of their interviews.
Yeah, I read it when it first came out.
Yeah.
We haven't commented on it, but you three guys are in L.A. and I'm in Phoenix. And Chris Squire died in Phoenix, and he lived in Phoenix. And I have to say, I did not know he lived in Phoenix. With most of the famous musicians who live here, like Alice Cooper and Glenn Campbell and George Benson and Steve Gadd, you hear it mentioned from time to time, either in the local media or just a private conversation. But I've been here for 23 years. I know he wasn't here that long, but I've never heard a single soul mention that he lived here. So he kept a low profile, and given his aquatic reputation, Arizona seems like an ironic choice because we're not exactly known for having an abundance of water here.
No,
it's true.
Well, I think that if you grow up in England, any place where there's an abundance of sun, you're going to gravitate to. I mean, they were in LA for a long time. John was in San Luis Obispo a long time. And yeah, they like these sunny areas.
So the mystery guest has arrived, as we alluded to earlier. We want to welcome Mr. C.J. Vanston, musician, composer, producer, ad hoc wardrobe supervisor for Jeff Beck. Listen to the Friends of Dan Music podcast for that story. It's an honor to have you here, sir. I'd like to first off ask you, what was your first experience with Chris Squire and Yes Music? And you can take it from there in whatever direction you'd like.
Well, it was Fragile, and I was probably 16. And, it was like an explosion going off in my brain. I don't think I left my bedroom for a week after I got that record. It was absolutely mind-blowing. And I became a Yes fanatic from that point, which is fan is short for fanatic. I was way into ELP. Yes, I was into Zappa. I was into a lot of the progressive kind of stuff, but Yes, he had a nerve that the other guys didn't hit. ELP and Zappa was so testosterone based to me, and Yes had a pastel kind of thing, like a Debussy, Stravinsky and Debussy thing. It was a beauty to it that those other bands didn't have. So Fragile was the first band. I went back to the Yes album after that, and then continued through Topographic and Close to the Edge, which in my mind is one of the great masterpieces in the history of music. So that's my link there.
It's funny you were talking about the difference between Yes and other rock bands and even other prog rock bands of being slightly less testosterone fueled. And I always thought that was an interesting facet of their sound too. Yes, I always considered a sort of musical sorbet. You put it in your ears, and it's a world so unto itself that you could then take off from any direction there you wanted and feel sort of cleansed afterwards.
Well, I gotta say, chicks dug Yes. ELP was kind of a dude's band, and same with Zappa, and I could go on and on. But I think it harkens more to the Pink Floyd and the bands that women and girls liked, and whatever music girls liked, that was okay with me. Yeah. But they had a beauty to them, and that I don't think has ever been attained, except for maybe by Weather Report. I think is the next thing I would think of like that, with that kind of depth of harmony and tonality. So.
Dan chiming in.
Yeah.
CJ, you produced Toto 14. Toto is going to be touring with Yes in the near future. And how are the band members in Toto taking this news about Chris?
Well, we haven't talked directly. We've been emailing back and forth. It's a huge loss, and I can't tell you how many times Yes came up during the making of Toto 14, and how many times Luke and I have talked about Yes and all our history together and the two albums we've made together. If you listen to Great Expectations on Toto 14, there's a lot of Yes in there. And then the opening song, Running Out of Time, there's a vocal harmony. You'll be on your way. Totally Yes.
Also, Transition, Steve Lukather's solo album you produced, title track, very sort of homage-y in spots.
Yeah, atmospheric and all that. We were huge Yes fans. We were all huge Yes fans. And that's one of the things, the reason I think we made a really great record was we all grew up on the same music. We all were healed on this incredibly rich time from, let's say, 1970 to 80 or 1968 to 74. That whole era was just, I'll put it up against anybody's era, from your Stevie Wonders to your Pink Floyds, to the Zeppelins, to Zappa. I could keep going on and on. Bill Withers, all that great stuff. But Yes had their own distinctive sound. At one point, a friend of mine has the multi-tracks to Close to the Edge. I won't mention his name because I don't know what the legality of that is. But we sat and listened to the vocal harmonies on that, and I know Chris was a huge part of those vocal harmonies. So
we've spoken about that. As a keyboard player yourself, Yes has had, Tony Kaye, Rick Wakeman, Patrick Moratz, a few different players. Do you have a favorite among those, or you said is it all just different palettes?
No, Rick Wakeman is the Sean Connery of Yes. He's the best. So, sorry.
The best Bond.
Yeah. Tony Kaye was, a great player, great parts, but nowhere near the tonal palette that Rick brought.
Wakeman's confidence as well was quite a thing to behold, in his showmanship.
I'll tell you, yeah. My friend who came over with these multi-tracks also had a live concert, was mixing a live concert of theirs, and I was blown away at Rick Wakeman's playing. I always kind of looked at him as kind of secondary to Keith Emerson, because Keith was the man. Keith was the Jimi Hendrix of keyboards. That was it. But, Rick was a little sneakier with the way he did stuff, and it wasn't so quite evident. But this live concert, he was like a machine gun. It was insane. It was jaw-droppingly great.
Keith Emerson was on my show, and we spoke about Jason Woodford's documentary, Pictures of an Exhibitionist. I know you were interviewed for that, and
sure.
So was Chris Squire. So, those segments, that movie comes out, hopefully later this year, the segments with Chris, in light of what's happened, are going to be so much more poignant.
Oh, absolutely. I made friends with David Woodford years ago. I don't even remember how I met David. It was through Keith, but I didn't know Keith very well then, and I became good friends with David. Then David was was hosting a film festival up in Kelowna, Canada, with his son, and they were having Keith be one of the judges for it, and Keith couldn't make it, and he recommended me, which was mind-blowing that Keith would recommend me for something. And that's when I met David and started getting into this movie. So, yeah, the fact that Chris is in there talking about Keith is a big deal. And, I think they're very compatible. You listen to some of those bass lines, the left-hand stuff that Keith was doing. It's very staccato. It's not your regular stuff. I read an interview with Chris years ago. He tried to get into doing sessions, and it was just the worst possible fit. There's no way that guy's going to play anything normal or what people want. And
so as a session player yourself, you have to be able to adapt to anything. Chris is Chris, which was the beauty of him.
Well, yeah, and that's the unbeauty of somebody like me. I'm really not a specialist like that. I've got a sound on my records, but not like the way he did. He changed the sound of that instrument. And the fact, first of all, you take the Rickenbacker, then you take the two pickups. I don't know if anybody's talked about this, but he ran his treble pickup through a guitar amp with distortion, but the bass amp did not have distortion. So most people think his whole tone is distorted, but it's not. That's why I had the low end. If you distort that low end, you lose that whole bass in the track, and he didn't do that. That was one of his trademarks to his sound, and that's why. And by the way, that sound freed up Steve Howe to do some more atmospheric stuff, because he had that aggressive thing going down there. So Steve didn't have to chug away. And it also freed up Bill Bruford. He was a percussionist and the lead guitar or rhythm guitarist and bassist at the same time. It was so crazy aggressive. The track I was going to bring up was Long Distance Runaround. Put that on, and it's insane. That to me is his trademark. Not The Fish is awesome, that's a great track, but Long Distance Runaround, that's Chris Squire through and through.
Here's a question. I don't know if this is relevant to your experience at all, but since the announcement in the last couple of days, most of the friends I have who are big Yes fans are broken down into two camps: the ones who can't stop listening to the catalog over and over and over again, kind of obsessively, and the ones who can't bear to listen to anything just at the moment. Do you fall off either side of that fence, or has it even been relevant to you?
I'm right in the middle, and what I did, I went back, I'd listen to Long Distance Runaround, I listened to The Fish, but I listened to some of the newer stuff just to see where he had gone, because I honestly didn't follow the band, for the last 15 years. And I was very surprised, by the way, how great some of this stuff sounded. And I was sorry I didn't follow them more, but I think I was kind of afraid to, because after Close to the Edge, Topographic Oceans was a little bit of a departure for me. So, which was, now I look back on it, an incredible record. So no, I didn't do it a lot, and I'm still kind of struggling with it.
Did you ever have any, either of you really, but CJ specifically, any personal experiences with the band? Did you ever, any live shows that stand out in your memory? Did you ever get a chance to meet any of them?
Never met one of them. I went to a couple shows when I lived in Michigan, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. I think I was probably so stoned I don't really remember too many details about the show other than the visual stuff. But no, never met any of the guys. I went to see them with Styx a couple years ago, and everybody had gone by the time I got backstage. So,
so the band is going out on tour with Toto, and Billy Sherwood's going to be stepping in. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's sustainable, or do you think this might be the end of Yes?
Oh, I think it's completely sustainable. As a matter of fact, I think that might light a fire under these guys. The last time I saw them, to be honest, was not the 100% what I was used to, and especially I missed the whole show, the lighting and the way Chris used to dress and everything. So I think this is going to up their game. I think it's the opposite. I think they're going to, because first of all, this is the same when astronauts die. Should we continue? Well, what would the astronauts say? So What would Chris Squire be telling the band to do right now? There's no question what he'd be saying. Keep going, do it, make it great. And I think that's what they're going to do.
My own take on that is if they survived John Anderson leaving, I mean, he was really the voice of Yes. He left and they carried on. He came back and he left and he came back. I would have thought just the thing, because, Bill Bruford left. Probably people didn't think anybody could replace him. Rick Wakeman left and other people came in. Steve Howe, Trevor Rabin, it seems to be their history. But one thing about Chris Squire, he's the only guy who's been there from the beginning and never left.
Yeah, and his contributions to the band were so much more than musical. I mean, he was a driving force. He was a guy who really kept things on the rails. And I remember an interview with Rick Wakeman about 25 years ago where he was saying, oh, yes, there could be a Yes, as far as I know, 100 years from now, where they just keep replacing members because that's what we've done since the beginning. So there's no musical sort of proprietary thing. I agree that it's definitely possible as long as they get someone who really knows how to steer the ship. There's no reason they couldn't.
Whenever there's a power leak like that, a vacuum, it's funny what's happening. And I think a band that's a lot like that is Toto. Look at the members of Toto that we've lost. And so my experience with the band, those guys climb inside of you. And personally for me, I lost my best friend and my partner, Greg Ladani, who taught me how to mix, basically. And when he left, I took so much of him inside of me. And that's when I started mixing, and that's when I would have never been a mixer if Greg was here, because I wouldn't have needed to. So I think there's things these guys are going to have to step up and do now that they never had to do before. I think it's going to be interesting. So,
well, we're looking forward to see what happens with that. Well, CJ, thank you so much for taking the time out to meet with us. I'm glad we were able to get this in to the show as well. And yes, I would absolutely love to have you on sometime to talk to you about your career and whatever else is on your mind. So,
well, my answer would be yes.
I don't think I can top that. All right. We now return to your panel show, already in progress.
Thanks for listening, everybody.